You feel like you're in a hole or a sewer, and you're looking up and you're calling out for help from people, and people are walking by, because they don't hear you. I don't think people know how blessed they are to be able to just hug somebody that they love, or to wake up in a house with people that love you. I haven't had the chance to do that in 28 years.
I'm just going to ask you, did you kill Marcus Boyd?
I did not kill Marcus. He was like a friend to me. He was one of my best friends, and I loved him.
In 1994, Marcus Boyd was shot and killed.
Marcus Boyd was shot and killed
when two masked men ran up and shot and killed Boyd.
When he pulled the trigger, I seen the flash. I swear I could almost see like muscle and tendons because the flash was so big. It's like an X-ray.
Could you see their faces? Could you identify these men?
No, I couldn't identify him.
He had an alibi.
I was about 3 miles away at a friend's house.
And his girlfriend at the time provided that alibi.
I know for a fact he didn't do it. He wasn't there. He was not involved.
You agreed to a lineup?
Agreed to a lineup.
I couldn't identify anybody in all of it.
Greg viewed the lineup with Lamar Johnson in it at least 3 times. There's no identification, and that should have been the end of it right there. But it wasn't.
I felt bullied by the detectives.
And only after pressure from the detective did he all of a sudden say, oh, yeah, that guy did it.
I just kept having pressure to go along with this.
He saw his friend murdered. He was scared. He was easily manipulated by the police and the prosecutor in this case.
I had what I believed to be a murderer, and I had an identification witness who I believed was truthful and honest. I presented the evidence that I had, and a jury convicted him.
A trial of errors from start to finish.
It was devastating. Since my conviction, I've been petitioning every judge to give me a hearing, and no judge has given me a chance to be heard. The problem is, I don't know what else to do.
I lost so much. Just milestones. Everything that a little girl wishes that she could, experience with her dad.
Our Conviction Integrity Unit found new evidence that will exonerate Mr. Lamar Johnson.
There's something powerful, really powerful in our system of justice when the prosecutor says, we're the ones who made the mistake. We're trying to free this man.
Free Lamar Johnson! Free Lamar Johnson!
It's devastating for me that this man has spent 28 years in prison for a crime he did not commit.
This is really kind of Lamar Johnson's last chance, isn't it?
Yes, that is absolutely true.
Convicted at 21, still locked up at 49, Lamar Johnson has spent most of his life in prison for a crime he insists he did not commit. How do you keep up hope?
I have a choice. I know the truth. I know that I didn't kill Marcus.
Lamar Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder in 1995 for shooting 25-year-old Marcus Boyd on his front porch. Johnson was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. What have you lost?
Time and There was a closeness between, especially with a father and his daughters. And I missed being able to be a part of their life.
You want your dad to come home?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Brittany Johnson was just 1 year old when her dad was sent away.
It was definitely hard, but I learned to live without my dad.
Kiera Barrow was just an infant then.
We're still waiting. There is still an innocent man in prison.
Kiera's mother, Erica Barrow. Did you think you'd marry him?
Yes, I did. I mean, he was my first love.
Lamar Johnson grew up in St. Louis, consistently ranked as one of the most dangerous cities in the country. His South Side neighborhood in 1994 was battered by high crime and homicide rates. Johnson had steered clear of serious trouble.
He wanted to better himself. He wanted to be the man that he needed to be for his children.
So Johnson, the 20-year-old father of two, worked at Jiffy Lube while attending community college. But he also had a dangerous side hustle, selling small amounts of crack cocaine for extra cash.
Yes, I was making some poor choices then, and I take responsibility for that. But that wasn't the sum of who I was.
Selling drugs wasn't his life. It was just something to help him manage until he could do better.
Johnson's good friend Marcus Boyd, 5 years older, had also started a family and was holding down a solid job at a printing company. And he too sold drugs on the side.
Marcus was like the preppy type. You know, he wasn't very street.
He was a really, really good guy.
Greg Elking, then 30, had worked briefly with Boyd at the printing company. And Elking admits he was an occasional customer. On the evening of October 30th, 1994, he wanted to get high, but Boyd said no.
He was like, we're gonna go to work tomorrow. So we actually sat down on the front porch up on the stairs.
Marcus Boyd's street, Louisiana Avenue, was empty. His girlfriend and their baby were upstairs.
All he talked about all the time, you know, was about his baby and about his girlfriend. He's making me laugh. We're kind of laughing at each other. But all of a sudden he went serious. He was like, oh no.
From the narrow pathway next to Boyd's apartment, two men came out of nowhere, barely visible in the dim light.
These guys, they had completely dark clothing and they had masks on.
Black masks like this one, and they had guns. The men flew up the porch steps, says Elking. One attacked Marcus Boyd.
And he's wrestling with Marcus.
The second gunman grabbed Elking.
And he says, get the up. I remember looking at him right in the guy's eyes. The other guy, I seen him put the gun right up to Marcus's like neck area. And when he pulled the trigger, I seen the flash. Boom. The third shot, I kind of seen Marcus's soul just go. And I knew he was dead.
To Elking's horror, both men continued to shoot Boyd, then vanished the same way they had appeared, sprinting down the dark pathway. Surprisingly, the shooters spared the only eyewitness. You say you looked into one shooter's eyes.
All I seen was the eyes.
Could you tell whether he was white or black?
I knew he was black.
When the gunmen were gone, Greg Elking took off in the opposite direction. As he ran away, Elking says he could hear Marcus Boyd's girlfriend screaming. It's still hard to talk about it, isn't it? And where were you when this happened?
I was about 3 miles away.
Johnson says he was with his girlfriend, Erica Barrow, and their 5-month-old daughter, Kiera, visiting friends. Erica says that entire evening, Lamar Johnson was out of her sight just once.
So we were there because he was making a transaction. Someone was coming And so he was just like, I'll be right back.
Johnson left the house, Erica says, just as she began changing Kiara's diaper.
And I went out to meet somebody that I was dealing with.
His customer picked him up at the corner of 39th and Lafayette, Johnson says. They completed a quick transaction while driving around the block.
By the time I finished changing her diaper and clean everything up, he's coming back up the steps.
And how long does that take?
3 to 5 minutes. And he's talking, you know, nothing out of the ordinary. He was just normal.
Minutes later, Johnson got a call that Marcus Boyd had been shot. The next day, he learned that Boyd had died. Johnson's own life began to unravel. According to investigators, when they asked Boyd's girlfriend whom she suspected, only one name came to mind: Lamar Johnson. She thought the longtime friends might have had a falling out.
Well, Marcus and I have never had an argument or a fight. I loved him. I had no reason to want to hurt him.
You agreed to talk to the cops without a lawyer.
Yeah.
That was risky, wasn't it?
Well, no, I didn't have anything to hide.
Four days after Marcus Boyd was shot to death on his front porch, St. Louis police tracked down the only eyewitness to the murder, Greg Elking. How would you describe what you went through that night?
It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life.
Shaken and scared, Elking says he was initially reluctant to talk until he met lead investigator Joe Nickerson.
I thought he was this amazing dude. I thought he was like Nick Nolte from 48 Hours out of a movie. He was awesome. I mean, it was somebody that I just immediately admired.
Elking says even though the shooters were wearing masks, he could tell they were dark-skinned black men, but he only saw the eyes of one of them. Still, Nickerson, he says, insisted on showing him several photos. One, says Elking, stood out.
I said, these eyes, there's something about these eyes, and that's all I said.
It was a photo of Lamar Johnson.
And immediately he said, would you sign the back of it? And I said, no, I don't want to sign the back of it.
Why not?
Because I didn't want nothing to do with this, because I couldn't pick out no murderer, and I don't even think he's the murderer. I didn't say he was the murderer.
Nickerson, Elking says, warned him his life could be at risk, telling him that Lamar Johnson was a dangerous man who may have been involved in as many as 6 murders. Attorney Lindsay Runnels says none of that was true.
If they had any evidence whatsoever, then or now, Lamar Johnson would be charged with the crime.
Runnels began working on Johnson's case when she was in law school. Does he have a record at all for violence?
No. His record is and was minor. It's a possession charge, possession of cocaine, and then a tampering with a license plate.
She says Johnson received probation for those offenses. Still, she says, cops, aware of his criminal record, kept him and young men like him on their radar.
It's just the usual suspects type of round 'em up and everybody's guilty by association.
But after the murder on Louisiana Avenue, police had a new reason to focus on Lamar Johnson. The victim's girlfriend had given them his name, and now they had what they said was a photo identification. On the evening of November 3rd, 1994, 4 days after the murder, they arrested Johnson along with his friend, Philip Campbell.
I couldn't even understand why. Why would they arrest you?
Johnson's girlfriend at the time and his alibi for the night of the murder, Erica Barrow.
I begged him to get a lawyer, and all he kept saying is, I don't want my mom and stepfather paying all this money for a lawyer. I didn't do it.
I didn't have anything to hide. So, I believed in the system. I believed that if I explained to them what I knew and where I was, that would sort itself out.
At the police station, Johnson agreed to a live lineup.
I wanted to try to be as cooperative as I could. I wanted them to investigate and talk to the people whose house I was that night. You know, I would expect that they would reach the conclusion that I didn't have anything to do with it.
But investigators never spoke to anyone who had been with Johnson on the night of the shooting, not even Erica Barrow. They put him in that lineup. He's the third man in this photo, and brought in Elking to view it.
Yeah.
Could you identify anyone?
No.
Altogether, Elking viewed that lineup 3 times and never picked Johnson. Elking was then asked to view a different live lineup. Lamar Johnson wasn't there, but the man arrested with him, Philip Campbell, is number 4 in this photo. Elking still couldn't identify anyone and says he feared he'd let down the detective he admired and trusted.
I felt so bad. I could see it in his eyes, like I hurt this guy. Like this whole time, you know, I've just wasted his time.
Then, according to Elking, he asked Detective Joe Nickerson how he could help.
All that came out of my mouth was like, all right, Joe, if you tell me what the numbers were and I'll tell you if they were correct.
What does he say to you?
He says 3 and 4, and I was like, you're right, 3 and 4.
Lamar Johnson was number 3 in that first lineup. Philip Campbell was the 4th man in the other lineup.
If Joe Nickerson is telling me that 3 and 4 is it, it's got to be Lamar and whoever, Philip, because he wouldn't lie to me. Joe wouldn't lie to me.
So you picked 3 and 4 because Nickerson told you?
Yeah.
We asked Joe Nickerson for an interview. He declined our request, but sent us a text saying in part, I went where the facts, evidence, and circumstances took me. Elking claims he told no one that Nickerson had allegedly given him the suspect's numbers in the lineups. Instead, he told the other detectives that he was able to identify Lamar Johnson because of his distinctive eye.
They had asked me, what do you mean about the eye when you say that you could pick, you know, these eyes? And I said, I don't know, like a lazy eye or something, like it's different from the other.
Dwight Warren, the prosecutor, says he pressed Elking on his identification of Johnson.
I believed Mr. Elking because I looked him straight in the eye and said, you know, I want to know if he did it, tell me you're sure of your identification. Please tell me the truth, because I don't want to go and charge somebody who's not guilty.
What did Greg Elking say to you when you said that to him?
Well, quote, end quote, I couldn't tell you, but he told me he was telling the truth, that he knew who did the shooting, and it was Lamar Johnson and Philip Campbell, so I charged them both.
In July 1995, Lamar Johnson went on trial with Elking as the star witness.
If he had backed off of that, I would never have issued the case. So he was absolutely essential.
To bolster the case, one of the witnesses the prosecution called was William Mock, a jailhouse informant with a lengthy criminal history, who claimed that he overheard Johnson and Campbell in a holding cell talking about the murder. But attorney Lindsay Runnell says Mock wasn't credible and that his cell wasn't close enough to hear anything.
Lamar wasn't ever celled with Campbell, and Campbell nor Lamar were ever in the same cell as William Mock. So how could you hear this if it happened at all, which it didn't?
Don't you want to make sure that jailhouse snitch is telling the truth?
How am I going to do that?
Well, you wouldn't put someone on the stand unless you could check out their story, right?
Unless I did check it out. He was in 2 jail cells away. He was in a position to be able to hear that.
Johnson didn't take the stand at his trial. The defense relied on his girlfriend, Erica Barrow, who told the jury he was with her at the time of the murder. It took less than 2 hours for the jurors to reach a verdict. Guilty. Johnson's life had been changed forever by Greg Elking, who says that as he was pointing at Johnson at trial, he knew he had identified the wrong man.
This isn't the dude I seen at all. Because to me, Lamar is not dark and not what I seen.
You had doubts right afterwards. Why didn't you tell somebody? Why didn't you say
because nobody talks to me. Nobody. Who am I going to tell them? I don't know who I could have told.
Did it occur to you at that moment that you might have put an innocent man
Yes.
behind bars?
Without a doubt, because I lied on the testimony. I lied because I thought I was doing the right thing.
Lamar Johnson was just 21 years old when he was convicted of murder.
At my trial, they did not even present a motive. They never explained why I supposedly did this.
And then, before his sentencing, Johnson received surprising new information that he believed would prove his innocence. Handwritten letters from his friend, the other suspected killer, Philip Campbell. One said, "You didn't do a thing."
He said, "I'm sorry you got convicted for something you didn't do." He said he wanted to come forth, but his attorney wouldn't let him because he thought he could beat his case.
And Philip Campbell was actually one of the shooters.
He was.
Campbell even named the other shooter who was with him on the night of the murder, a man named James B.A. Howard. Johnson now had the names of both shooters. He wrote the judge and asked for a hearing, but his request was denied. In September 1995, Lamar Johnson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Girlfriend Erica Barrow blames law enforcement.
You didn't care to check his alibi. You wanted to blame someone, and you did exactly that. You just flat out didn't care. You didn't care.
Lamar Johnson didn't give up. He became his own jailhouse lawyer, sifting through police reports, trial transcripts, and gathering new evidence. Johnson, with legal help, filed a petition asking for a new trial in 1996. Again, he was denied. Then 2 years later, he would meet another inmate with a similar story.
We were both assigned to Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri. Our friendship was almost instant.
Ricky Kidd, who is also serving a life sentence for murder, remembers when he first learned about Johnson's case.
He said, "I have to go to the law library." I said, "What are you working on?" And he turned to me, he said, "Well, I know everybody says this, but I'm innocent." And a big old smile appeared across my face, kind of like you're seeing right now. And I said, "Well, I know everybody say this, but I'm innocent too."
The two men made a pact in prison.
He said, "Let's make a promise that whoever makes it out will come back for the other." And we shook on it.
The Midwest Innocence Project had already been working on Kidd's case. Before he himself was exonerated, Kidd says he convinced lawyers there to take a closer look at Johnson's case. When that team of lawyers began their research, they discovered that the star witness, Greg Elking, in prison himself for bank robbery, had written a letter to a clergyman admitting he had lied at Johnson's trial. What did you think would happen?
Again, I thought that I would be heard. So it made me even more hopeful that the court would at least listen.
Elking's letter would reveal another reason why he agreed to testify against Johnson. At the time of the murder, Elking had been in serious financial straits. Detective Nickerson and the prosecutor's office put him in a witness protection program. Elking's debts were paid and his outstanding traffic warrants cleared. And that's not all. Whose idea was to give you money, to move you, to give you cash?
Joe Nickerson. They paid my first month and last month's rent for a house.
Altogether, Elking had received more than $4,000. None of that was disclosed to Johnson and his lawyer at trial. Johnson repeatedly asked for a hearing. He was denied and his case stalled.
I mean, what else is needed? The only thing that I haven't been able to present is DNA. And God, I wish there was some DNA.
Then in 2018, St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner agreed to look at his case. She had created a conviction integrity unit to look at cases of possible wrongful conviction.
And I started seeing some red flags. And I consulted my team, and I said, I think we have a problem here.
One of the many flags for Gardner was the timeline for the murder. Could Johnson have had time to kill his friend Marcus Boyd? Erica Barrows said Johnson had only left their friend's apartment for around 5 minutes.
And you cannot drive that distance. You'd have to be speeding through St. Louis to even get there. And then you'd have to speed all the way back. There's no way you could do that.
But prosecutor Dwight Warren says Erica could have lost track of time, that Johnson could have been gone as long as 15 minutes.
She didn't have a stopwatch. Lamar got into a car and took off.
At Johnson's trial, Detective Joe Nickerson testified that it only took him 5 minutes to go from the alibi location to the crime scene. We asked Chief Investigator Robert Ogilvie from the Circuit Attorney's Office to take us on that same drive. According to testimony, it just takes 5 minutes to get there. You're laughing.
Yeah, I don't think.
We timed the drive using a cell phone. Yep. 12:55, 13 minutes. 13 minutes one way. That's more than double the time Detective Nickerson said it took. In 2019, Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner's team released a detailed report listing numerous errors that undermined Johnson's conviction. As a prosecutor, you put people in prison. You don't try to get them out.
As a prosecutor, no prosecutor, I believe, wants to secure a conviction wrongfully, using wrong tactics. That's just not what we want to do. We want to get it right.
Jurors never learned that jailhouse informant William Mock was a racist who had a hatred for black people, nor did they hear the majority of his criminal record, and they were never told Greg Elking had been paid thousands of dollars. Gardner was convinced Johnson was innocent, but when she tried to get his conviction overturned, court after court, including the Missouri Supreme Court, said she didn't have the power.
And when you try to abide by your oath and you're stopped every way, it weighs on you.
In 2021, the Missouri legislature passed a law that gave Gardner and other prosecutors the power to bring cases of innocence to court. A year later, Johnson got the news he had been praying for. After nearly 3 decades in prison, he would finally get a hearing to present new evidence in his case. On December 12, 2022, Lamar Johnson and his legal team gathered in a St. Louis courtroom for a week-long hearing. His daughters, Brittany and Kiara, were in the courtroom nearly every day.
I think we're all trying to be hopeful that my dad gets justice.
One man, Judge David Mason, will decide Johnson's future.
You may be seated.
He has 3 options: overturn the conviction and grant a new trial, overturn the conviction and declare Johnson innocent, or he could uphold the jury's verdict. What is at stake here with this judge's decision?
Justice and the integrity of the whole criminal justice system.
Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner sat by Johnson instead of her usual seat at the prosecution table. Gardner appointed 2 lawyers to handle Johnson's case, Charlie Weiss and Jonathan Potts.
I took this case because I believe that Lamar Johnson's innocent. I didn't take it because I think he might be innocent.
There was no physical evidence at all connecting Lamar Johnson with the murder of Marcus Boyd, period.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. This is a rather historic moment in this court. This is the first time where the court is hearing an actual innocence claim filed by a prosecuting attorney.
Good morning, Your Honor.
The Missouri Attorney General's office sent a team of their own to argue that Johnson's conviction should stand. In response to our request for an interview, They provided us with this written statement that read in part, "The Attorney General's office has fought to keep a convicted murderer in prison."
But Judge,
Attorney Miranda Lesh told the judge not to trust the witnesses who were about to vouch for Johnson's innocence.
they're going to ask you to believe convicted murderers and gang members. Their evidence is not credible.
Johnson's team calls their first witness. James Howard takes the stand and admits that he's one of the men who murdered Marcus Boyd.
How did Marcus die?
Me and Philip Campbell killed him on his front porch.
Remember, Philip Campbell had written Lamar Johnson saying he and Howard were the real shooters. Campbell, who was later convicted of the murder, took a deal and served only 5 years. He has since died. Howard was never charged with Boyd's death. He's currently in prison for life for unrelated crimes, including murdering another man.
I killed him the exact same way. I fired 2 shots in the back of his head.
But attorneys Jonathan Potts and Charlie Weiss can't rely on Howard's word alone. They must now tear apart the original case against Lamar Johnson. They call Greg Elking, the state's former star witness.
Law enforcement was wanting me to help, and I trusted them. I wanted to help.
Elking told the court that he felt pressured by Detective Joe Nickerson to identify Johnson in the lineup.
He goes, I know you know who it is, and you're just not saying. And this is the part I hate the most. I just remember saying to him, you tell me the numbers, and I'll tell you if you're right. And he did. And I was like, that was it. That was the numbers. And I've been living with it 25, 28 years, and I'm telling you, I just wish I could change time.
On day 3, Judge Mason questioned the original prosecutor in the case, Dwight Warren, about the reliability of Greg Elking's identification of Lamar Johnson.
He told you and the officers that it was based upon him looking at the eyes, because that was all he could see. Isn't that correct?
I believe so.
And did he or did he not tell you that all of this happened within seconds? Yes. Yes. And that's what you decided was sufficiently liable to seek a murder conviction.
To take it to a jury. Yes, sir. 2 perpetrators came around.
Warren admitted to Johnson's lawyers that without an eyewitness, he would never have filed charges in the first place.
Oh, absolutely not. I didn't have any evidence.
You solemnly swear that the total you're about.
On day 4, Lamar Johnson finally got the chance to defend himself in his own words.
So you talked to Detective Nickerson that night, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you talked to
Attorney Miranda Lesh asked him about his conversation with Detective Nickerson a few days after the murder.
I said, man, that boy was my friend. I didn't shoot him. I said, okay. I would voluntarily participate in the lineup.
You had everything to lose at that point, didn't you?
I didn't think so.
You didn't think so? You were arrested for a homicide.
I didn't commit the homicide, so why would I be concerned that I had everything to lose?
As the hearing week neared the end, Detective Nickerson takes the stand. The man Elking claims pressured him into falsely identifying Johnson.
Mr. Elkin goes, hey, I know who it is. It's number 3 in the first lineup, and it's number 4 in the second lineup.
And did you tell him to say that?
I didn't tell him to say anything.
But Judge Mason had some questions of his own for Nickerson.
Are you aware that all the evidence suggests that your witness could only recognize some aspect of the eyes?
I'm aware of that.
Please stand up, Mr. Johnson. I'm just curious, because I don't know. What in the world is distinctive about this man's eyes?
Well, you can tell his eyes are different.
Tell me, what do you see?
I can tell that his right eye is different from his left. One is lower or higher than the other.
Okay.
How would you describe the involvement of Judge Mason in this case?
Well, that was one of the most unique things I've seen in any trial I've ever covered.
Columnist Tony Messenger covered the case for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
He didn't just ask questions, he took over the questioning at times and made it very clear when he was believing something and when he wasn't.
After 5 days of witnesses, court adjourned. With his freedom on the line, Johnson was taken to a St. Louis jail to wait for Judge Mason's decision.
I don't know how to not fight for my innocence, to fight for what was wrongfully taken from me.
What do you think the judge should do in this case? Take a look at the evidence at 48hours.com.
It's been really hard. We heard everything in court.
Lamar Johnson's daughter, Kiera Barrow, has finally heard what happened to her father so many years ago.
The misconduct and the negligence that occurred.
The hardest thing was just that Greg lied, knowing that his testimony did put him in jail.
Brittany Johnson believes that Greg Elking's lies robbed her of time with her dad.
I'm very angry.
This is hard.
Yes, it's very hard. Oh, I hate that I'm crying right now. The dad is the most important role.
But their wait isn't over. 2 months pass with no decision from the judge. Kiera is hoping it happens soon.
We've been robbed of so many opportunities and milestones. I'm getting married in April of this year. It would just mean so much to me. And I know to my father, to have him there with me and for him to be able to give me away.
Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, Johnson's family and friends returned to the courtroom. Lawyers with the Missouri Attorney General's office fighting Johnson's release are at one table. At the other, the team trying to win Johnson's freedom. Seated next to Johnson, his attorney, Lindsay Runnels. What should Judge Mason do in this case?
Judge Mason should vacate these convictions, and Lamar Johnson should walk out of that courtroom today.
All right.
After both legal teams were given copies of his final opinion, Judge David Mason announced his decision on February 14, 2023.
After reviewing both the underlying trial as well as the entirety of the hearing, for the reasons stated above, it is hereby ordered that the motion of the Circuit Attorney of the 22nd Judicial Circuit filed herein for the benefit of Lamar Johnson is granted. The conviction of Lamar Johnson in State v. Lamar Johnson, cause 22-941-37068, is hereby set aside and held for naught.
Johnson's murder conviction was overturned. The judge also found that there was clear and convincing evidence of Johnson's innocence. After more than 28 years behind bars, he was more than a free man. 49-year-old Lamar Johnson had finally been exonerated.
Bailiff, this hearing is adjourned. All right.
This time, he would leave the courthouse not in a prison van, but in a black sedan. When I first met you, I asked you to identify yourself.
My name's Lamar Johnson. I've been in prison for 26 years now.
And if I asked you to identify Lamar Johnson right now, what would you say?
I am a free man, an exonerated man, and a blessed man.
How important was it to have Greg Elking take the stand and tell the judge what he had done at trial?
That was very important. He intentionally, falsely identified me. But not only did he acknowledge that he made a mistake, he took steps to try to correct it. And I'm extremely grateful to him for that.
And during that time he spent in prison, he says he never forgot about his friend Marcus Boyd, who died that night.
I didn't want Marcus's family thinking that I did this to him, because I genuinely cared about Marcus. Marcus was a good guy.
In the meantime, Johnson is starting over. His friend Ricky Kidd knows it won't be easy.
It's gonna be tough. But Lamar has the ability to adapt and adjust and see new opportunities.
Worked 30 years for the Department of Corrections for pennies. I don't have anything. I hope somebody's willing to give me a shot. I want to work.
You have a date coming up, an important date?
My youngest daughter is getting married, and it'd be nice if I could do something special and nice for them. But presence matters more than presence. And I'm going to make the best of the life I have.
A couple disappears.
We're in a million different directions trying to find her and him.
A lot of people trusted him with a lot of money.
He told me that he was adopted by Ronald Reagan's son.
Who was the man last seen with Diana Duvay? 48 Hours, Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
This is definitely a life and death struggle. I don't think the stakes get any higher than what's at stake here. This is a man's life who's on the line.
The thing about this case that's hard to deal with is those little babies.
In this fire-gutted house, firefighters found 6 bodies.
It was a shock to everybody. It was probably the most brutal crime that ever happened in that part of the state. You're talking about 4 little babies asleep in their bed, a 16-year-old asleep in her bed, and their grandmother, who's also killed at the age of 45.
When she took that last breath, I guarantee you, her last thought was, how am I going to protect those babies now?
Whoever committed the crime was in a frenzy. There were 66 stab wounds.
66. Minimum of 66, by the way. Those are the ones that they counted.
Those were living people. Those are my daughters. That was my niece and my nephew.
Who can do that? That's what's so horrible.
There's a lot of pressure to find this person or these people that have done this.
4 days after the crime, law enforcement had their suspect.
They got their man, and that's the end of the story. They did not do their job.
Tunnel vision. Total tunnel vision.
Anthony Graves was convicted of being an accomplice.
I'm absolutely convinced that he's innocent. I'm a professor. I'm not paid to be a lawyer. I do it because I believe in it.
Nicole and her students played a really pivotal role in this.
What did you see yourself as being up against?
We're Texas. We like to execute people.
How many people have you put up on death row?
A lot. There's nothing wrong with winning when you're convicting people who are guilty.
We want to get him out. We think he is truly an innocent person.
I've written crime stories for Texas Monthly for 13 years. What I wanted to do was to try to get to the bottom of what had happened in this case.
There is an innocent person who is going to death row if I don't do my job.
Does this man get to live? Does this man get to die?
Grave Injustice. Tonight's 48 Hours Mystery.
This was such a horrific event in that town and continues to be an event that really haunts the people of Somerville.
This used to be where the Davis family lived before the early morning hours of August 18th, 1992. In the midst of the rubble, the police found those 6 bodies, all members of the same family.
This was a family that almost everyone in town knew, liked, respected.
The victims, a grandmother, her daughter, and 4 grandchildren who were staying with them. Reporter Pam Koloff is still moved by the fact that the family never had a chance.
There was Bobby Davis, the grandmother to the 4 children, who was bludgeoned and then stabbed to death. There was 16-year-old Nicole, her daughter, who was a high school student and athlete, who was bludgeoned and shot. And then there were the 4 grandchildren. They were 9-year-old Denitra, 6-year-old Brittany, 5-year-old Leerin, and 4-year-old Jason.
My daughters were exotically beautiful.
Glenda Rutledge was Leerin and Brittany's mother.
They were my legacy, and I was so looking forward to the chance to get it right. To raise strong, sure, confident, successful women. You know, I wanted to do that so bad.
Glenda's ex-husband, Keith Davis, lost almost his entire family that night.
These were little babies, and my mother, who we adored, who was the center of our life.
He was convinced it was a random crime.
I just couldn't imagine someone from that area harming anyone in my family, because we didn't have any enemies, we hadn't been in any trouble.
Roy Ritter lived and worked not far from the murders. 5 days after the crimes, he remembers hearing there was a break in the case.
I could hear the radio, and the news would always come on. And it was early in the morning, and they came up and they said, arrests have been made, and they said, Anthony Charles Graves, age 27.
Anthony Graves was one of Ritter's best friends. Graves had worked for him for a while at his machine shop, and the two became so close that Graves had even been in Ritter's wedding party.
It just freaked me out, but my immediate thing was, yeah, right, no way, and what could possibly be going on here,
You didn't believe it?
Well, of course not. Absolutely not.
Ritter knew Anthony Graves as a gentleman, a father of 3, and he now was hearing his friend was a murderer of women and children.
In my heart, my convictions were, that's impossible, because Anthony would never do that. Anthony would never hurt or raise a hand to a woman, and especially not a child, especially the way he loved his children.
And when Graves was arrested, he seemed equally stunned.
You're charged with the offense of capital murder.
Who? Capital murder? Me?
Roy was so sure of his best friend's innocence that he even put up $10,000 of his own money to hire a top lawyer for his upcoming hearing, convinced it would all soon be over.
There's no way they have anything. They don't have anything.
But police did have the words of this man. Robert Carter was the father of the youngest victim, 4-year-old Jason. And investigators had grown suspicious when they noticed Carter had injuries that were hard to explain.
At the funeral for the victims, Robert Carter showed up heavily bandaged on the left side of his face and his left hand, and the bandages were covering up severe burns.
Carter claimed he burned himself after his lawnmower blew up.
The Texas Rangers obviously noticed Mr. Carter at the funeral. He was difficult to not notice, and they visited him at his house after the funeral and took him in for questioning.
Carter insisted he had nothing to do with the murders, but the Rangers had learned that he had a motive. Carter was married, but he had recently been served with a demand for child support from another woman, the mother of his son, Jason. And investigators believe Carter went there to kill Jason.
He very clearly wanted his 4-year-old son dead.
After the murders, investigators believe Carter set the fire to cover his tracks. But from the beginning, they believed he must have had help. There were so many victims and so many weapons.
There was a gun, there was a knife, and there was a hammer. And investigators found it difficult to believe that one person could have wielded 3 different objects in killing 6 different people.
The Rangers interrogated Carter for hours, and he finally gave them a name.
During his interrogation, Robert Carter placed himself at the crime scene, but he said that he had not taken part in the murders himself, that the person who had committed the murders was a man named Anthony Graves, who was his wife's first cousin.
Within hours, Anthony Graves had been arrested and taken to the police station. He took a lie detector test and failed.
Man, this is a big mistake. Capital murder. I never even shot a gun in my life. God, am I dreaming or what, man?
At first, there was little more than Carter's word to tie Anthony to the case, but investigators would soon get help from the last place anyone would expect, Anthony's best friend.
And then they asked me if I'd ever known him to carry a knife. I said, I gave Anthony a knife one time.
In Somerville, Texas, nothing moves very swiftly, except for the occasional freight train and sometimes the desire for justice.
Emotions were running so high in Somerville leading up to these trials that the mayor at the time said that people in the community didn't even want to bother, that they wanted to, quote, bring back the hanging tree.
But events would unravel a little more conventionally. Robert Carter stood trial and was quickly convicted. And then it was time for Anthony Graves, the man whom Carter had named as his accomplice.
Things you see in a horror movie. They said I did it.
And did you?
No. Would never do anything like that. I'm not a violent person at all. It was just crazy.
Graves said he knew Robert Carter only in passing and didn't know the victims at all. In fact, there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime.
I'm like, whatever's going on is going to be cleared up, because I haven't done anything wrong.
But authorities only focused more on Graves. He had said he never owned a knife, but investigators learned he once did, and that it was given to him by his good friend, Roy Ritter.
And I said, I gave Anthony a knife one time around his birthday, and I have one that's exactly like it. And they asked me if I still had that knife, and I said, yep.
The actual murder weapons were never found, but investigators wanted Ritter's knife, the one he said was identical to the knife he gave Graves.
And they said, well, would you mind if we examined it? And I said, no, I wouldn't mind at all.
Ritter thought the knives were too flimsy to inflict any serious wounds, and some of the victims had knife wounds that went through their skulls. So Ritter was stunned when those test results came back.
The blade fit inside the skull cap perfectly.
So all of these folks from the DA's office told you that your knife, which was identical to the one you gave Anthony, fit perfectly into the holes in those baby skulls.
Yes, sir.
What did you make of that?
I didn't want to believe it.
Because if that was true...
My friend was a murderer. Right?
And his friend Anthony Graves's murder trial began in October 1994. District Attorney Charles Sebesta's star witness was Robert Carter.
I would have hated to have had to have gone to the jury without Carter's testimony.
But Carter was a problem witness. He was a liar. He had changed his story several times, sometimes implicating Graves, sometimes not.
And so when he got on the stand, were you worried about what he would say?
No.
Why?
Because I told my attorney I wanted him to testify. I said, because there's no way this man can look me in my face and lie on me. I was just trying to have faith in the fact that this guy would be honest, you know, because this is my life. This is my life.
So what did he say when he got up on the stand?
He lied. He lied. He said I did a crime with him.
Carter took the stand and said it was Graves who stabbed several victims to death, and Roy Ritter had to testify about the knife he gave Graves.
I mean, it was a very bad position to be put in. I was very torn, conflicted about it. But they said it fit perfectly.
How did his testimony feel to you as opposed to the other testimony?
Like betrayal. Like betrayal. Because he knows me. This man knew me, knew my family, knew my kids.
And there were more damaging witnesses waiting to testify against Graves. Sebesta said he had found 5 people at the jail where Graves and Carter were held who told him they heard them talking about the murders.
When you have 5 people who overhear conversations, very damning conversations between Carter and Graves on what they did and what they've got to do, that in itself, that's significant. That's very admissible. I probably could have done with 1 or 2. In a capital murder case, you want as much as you can. We had 5.
Sebesta may have had corroborating witnesses, but Anthony had alibi witnesses.
Where were you that night?
I was in my mother's apartment with my brother, a lady friend, and my sister.
Anthony's brother, Arthur Curry, testified for him and has never changed his story.
My brother never left the house that night. Never. He never, ever left. And he never left the house that night.
Anthony's girlfriend, another alibi witness, was set to take the stand as well, but when the day came, she unexpectedly refused. The man who lost most of his family, Keith Davis, had heard more than enough.
I've seen this guy hundreds of times in court.
When you looked at Anthony Graves, what did you see?
A murderer. It was though he had horns like a devil. He looked like an evil person to me at the time.
And the jury agreed. Anthony Graves was convicted of 6 counts of capital murder. The sentence, death.
This is crazy. I go from my home where I'm supposed to be safe, feel safe, and now I'm going to death row for something I didn't even do.
But as it turns out, the jury might not have heard everything.
They did not know that there was a critical piece of evidence missing.
I'm not a violent person. I'm not a bad person. I respect people. I carry myself in a dignified manner. Why me? Out of all the people in the world, why me?
By 2002, Anthony Graves had spent 8 years on death row. One more inmate who swore he was innocent as the state of Texas moved ever closer to executing him.
Were you thinking about your death?
No, never thought about my death. Thought about my life. My children, my mom. I just need to hold on to something, a good memory.
Anthony's optimism may have kept him going on death row, but for his family, as the years passed, it was getting harder to keep hope alive.
I couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And just to even fathom him being put to death, that would be the ultimate nail in all of our caskets. If they killed him for nothing.
Robert Carter was executed, and Graves kept losing his appeals. He was running out of chances when his case caught the attention of the Innocence Network, which sent the case to Nicole Cazares's journalism class at Houston's University of St. Thomas.
We weren't out to prove anyone innocent. That was not our goal. Our goal was just to find out the truth.
Did you have any faith in them? I mean, did you think they could help you?
Yeah. Because being exonerated by the public meant just as much to me as being exonerated by the courts. I wanted people to know that my mother didn't raise a murderer. My mother raised a good son. That meant something to me.
It didn't take long for the students and their professor to realize the case against Anthony Graves had serious problems, beginning with the star witness.
I think one of the first things that we noticed was that Robert Carter had recanted his testimony against Anthony right before he was executed. And that's very unusual.
In May of 2000, while strapped to the gurney in the Texas death chamber, Robert Carter took sole responsibility for the murders. It was me and me alone, he said. Anthony Graves had nothing to do with it. I lied on him in court.
And I think it's really important to listen to someone's essentially dying words. If there's ever a time when someone might be telling the truth, I would think that might be it.
In fact, for years before his execution, Robert Carter said to anyone who would listen that Anthony had nothing to do with the crimes. He even said the only reason he named Graves as his accomplice was because he saw him on the street before he was arrested.
Anthony Graves did not have any part in the murders and was not present before, during, or after I committed the multiple murders at the Davis home.
This is Robert Carter in a 1997 statement. In it, he says he told Sebesta the same thing. In fact, he swears he said that to Sebesta just hours before he took the stand in Graves' trial.
I told the district attorney and investigators that Graves is innocent and had nothing to do with these murders.
But Sebesta didn't believe him. Carter went on to testify against Graves anyway because he said he felt pressured by the DA.
Without Robert Carter's testimony, the state didn't have a case.
Except defense lawyers say Sebesta never told them that Carter had just recanted, as Sebesta was required to do by law.
Imagine that you're Anthony's attorney and you are facing Robert Carter on cross-examination. How meaningful would it have been for you to be able to say, Mr. Carter, isn't it true that just 5 minutes ago you said Anthony Graves had nothing to do with this? What would Robert Carter have said? Would he have cracked? Would he have taken back his testimony? We'll never know.
Sebesta has long insisted he told the defense what Carter said.
His response was that, his 8th or 9th story.
But Graves' attorney denies that. And while the lawyers spent years arguing before appellate courts about what Sebesta did or did not tell the defense, the students were gathering new evidence on the off chance that Graves might get a new trial.
We did weekend trips, and we would take 2 cars, and we would have a list of people and places that we were going to go.
And the amateur investigators were uncovering troubling evidence, especially about those jailhouse witnesses who Sebesta said overheard incriminating statements from Graves, from nearby cells, and over the intercom.
It was Texas summer, so there were large fans running. One of the intercoms was actually ripped out of the wall, and it was just wires.
Megan Bingham is one of the students.
That maybe this intercom system wasn't all that fantastic. You know, what could you hear? Was it actually working?
They were working. Some of the intercoms and some of the cells were not working. I don't know which ones, but I do know that at least one of those intercoms on 1 and 2 or whatever cells they were in was working.
How do you know that?
Because I was told this by law enforcement.
Nicole and the students also tracked down and met with Graves' former girlfriend, the one who could have provided him an alibi if she had taken the stand.
She said she was very sorry that she hadn't testified at Anthony's original trial.
So why didn't the girlfriend testify? Right before she was supposed to take the stand, DA Charles Sebesta said in open court that she was a suspect in the case and might be indicted, even though investigators had nothing on her.
Sir, couldn't that be read, though, as sort of a coy ploy, if you will, to scare away a woman who could very well alibi your defendant.
Had absolutely nothing to do with that.
She fled in fear and in tears. She said, they put him in jail on nothing. What's to stop them from putting me in jail on nothing?
After a 4-year investigation, talking to more than 100 witnesses, Nicole Cazares and her students turned over their findings to Graves' lawyers to help with his appeals.
Anthony Graves is innocent.
Anthony Graves is innocent.
Anthony Graves is an innocent man.
But Anthony Graves remained behind bars on death row until March 2006, about 12 years after he was found guilty. And then he got his first big break. A federal appeals court, one of the toughest in the country, tossed out his conviction.
I cried. I pumped my fist and I was like, yes, God is good. Yes, I knew it. My case was overturned. Somebody seen the truth.
District Attorney's Office.
The court skewered Charles Sebesta, called his behavior egregious for, among other things, intentionally withholding evidence that could have helped Graves, most notably that Carter had recanted right before he testified.
Anthony Graves did not have any part in the murders and was not present.
But even after the court's decision, Anthony was not a free man. Sebesta had retired, but the new DA said he would try Graves again. So Anthony walked out of death row and into the county jail, where he sat, waiting for his next trial for 4 years.
And you can't believe that it could actually happen in real life, but it did.
This time around, Graves has a seasoned defense team appointed by the judge, Catherine Scardino and Jimmy Phillips, assisted by Nicole Cazares.
We don't know what we'd do without her. I mean, she's like our Graves encyclopedia.
The lawyers will have to be on their toes because this is their opponent.
Like you're mad, like you're afraid, like you can't stop.
Kelly Siegler, widely regarded as the toughest prosecutor in Texas.
What does that say about David Tim?
Has been appointed to handle the Graves case.
Have you ever lost a capital case?
A death penalty case?
Yeah.
No. I would say this is one of the worst capital murder cases that anyone could ever talk about or deal with.
Kelly Siegler should know she sent 19 men to death row.
You will hear from the evidence in this case.
So in February 2010, she was ready, willing, and eager to make it an even 20 when she was appointed to retry Anthony Graves. That scare you that she was coming after you?
No.
Why not?
I was standing up for what was right, so it didn't make no difference who was on the case. The fact that I was innocent wasn't going to change.
By the fall of 2010, Pam Koloff's investigation of the case had produced one of the longest articles in the history of Texas Monthly magazine.
There were so many things about this case that fascinated me, beginning with how weak the evidence was. I wanted to understand how someone could be sent to death row on so little evidence.
Of course, making Graves's case in print is a lot easier than making it in court. With the trial date approaching and Kelly Siegler circling, defense attorneys Catherine Scardino and Jimmy Phillips were feeling the pressure.
You make a mistake in a death penalty case, and it's over.
They chose to hire a good prosecutor. We're going to have to work hard and be doubly, triply prepared. Kelly is a formidable opponent.
Siegler has beaten most of the best lawyers in Texas, and now she asked for a meeting with the Graves team.
Why did she want to meet with us? Was she trying to get information from us? Was she trying to learn what our trial strategy was? I didn't really know what to make of it.
Siegler met with the Graves lawyers around this table, and she asked a lot of questions. But the defense team could not have imagined why. The prosecutor, with her 19-0 record on death penalty cases, was having serious problems with the case against Anthony Graves.
I read every page of every document in 25 boxes. And at some point, it switched from getting ready to go to trial to can we go to trial to, oh my God, what happened here?
Siegler and her investigator, Otto Hannick, soon realized Nicole and her students were right on target.
Every single time we would re-investigate or re-talk to a witness that they had talked to, we would find that they were right.
One by one, the pillars of the prosecution's case crumbled.
We tried to find paperwork, people, anything that we could, especially a motive, to say Anthony Graves committed the capital murder with Robert Carter, and we found nothing.
Otto Hannick tried to confirm the testimony from Sebesta's jailhouse witnesses.
We can't find anybody that can positively say in court or in this room that I heard Anthony Graves say this. I heard Robert Carter say this.
He looked into Roy Ritter's knife.
The blade is flimsy.
And according to Hannick, a knife this flimsy could not have caused the kind of wounds to the skulls that were found on some victims.
I personally do not believe that that blade is strong enough, nor is this knife made well enough to go through human skulls.
It's a switchblade knife. They're made pretty sturdy.
DA Charles Sebesta had argued Graves's identical knife had inflicted 66 stab wounds the night of the murder.
There's no doubt that that knife could have survived that. We had Texas Ranger testimony that it could have done it.
But Hannick, who is a former Texas Ranger himself, believes the knife would have left its mark on the killer.
When you get down to the 10th, 11th, 12th stab wound, the knife becomes very slippery, becomes very bloody. The person that inflicted those wounds is also going to have an injury themselves.
And did Anthony Graves have any injuries on his hands?
None at all.
Did Robert Carter have any injuries on his hands?
No.
What does that tell you?
That tells me that this is not the knife that caused those injuries.
Siegler thought any new case against Graves would have to be built almost solely on Robert Carter's testimony. But that was before she found out how Charles Sebesta got that testimony from his star witness.
He made a deal with Mr. Carter.
And what a deal he made.
Sebesta had a powerful card to play. Carter's wife, Teresa. Shortly after the killings, Sebesta had also indicted her for capital murder.
She had given conflicting statements about his burns. There were a number of things that she did.
The deal Sebesta made, he would not question Carter about his wife on the stand if he testified against Graves.
How does a prosecutor, I should say, how does an ethical prosecutor put a witness on the stand, your main piece of evidence in a death penalty case, and say, okay, you get up there and talk about what you did and what Graves did, but I'm not going to ask you about your wife. You can't do that.
Why in the world would you agree not to ask him about her?
Well, I needed his testimony.
And Sebesta points out the deal was approved by a judge and the defense never questioned it.
I put on the record. I did put on the record.
The indictment against Carter's wife was later dismissed due to a lack of evidence, and Siegler never bought into Sebesta's theory that there had to be multiple killers.
We appreciated the fact that you didn't have to have 3 killers because 5 of the people killed were children, some little babies asleep in their bed. How hard is it for a grown man to stab little babies asleep in their bed?
And all the evidence, Siegler says, points to Robert Carter, not Anthony Graves.
There must have been a moment when you concluded, gee whiz, this guy's innocent. Not just not guilty, but innocent.
It wasn't even a difficult decision. It was pretty clear.
And by innocent, you mean he wasn't there, he had nothing to do with it?
Nothing.
He'd never even been in town.
No motive, no reason, no connection, nothing.
Never in a million years would I have predicted that this would be the outcome of this case, particularly with Kelly Siegler as prosecutor.
Oh my God, what happened in Anthony Graves' trial?
On an autumn afternoon in the Burleson County, Texas jail, Anthony Graves was summoned unexpectedly out of his cell.
I'm sitting and writing a letter They come get me and say, put your shirt on, and walk me up to the front of the jail.
Nicole Cazares and Jimmy Phillips, members of his legal team, were there to see him with a message he'd waited to hear for 18 years. The murder charges had been dropped.
Both of us could barely talk. We were so emotional. And she says, Anthony, God is great. And he knew.
And she just said, you're free, man. You can walk, you can leave right now. It's over, Anthony. Hey.
And on October 27th, 2010, the man known as inmate number 999127 got his good name back. Anthony Graves, carrying all of his belongings and looking a little dazed, walked out of jail and into the warm Texas sun.
Unbelievable! Oh.
This is probably the dumbest question I've ever asked, but I got to ask you anyway.
Well, ask away. Come on.
How do you feel?
Well, I feel good.
Yeah, I'll bet you do, sir.
I feel good. I feel good. 18 years was a long time. I think I've lost a lot, but today I gained my freedom.
You want to talk to someone here? Hold on.
His first call as a free man is to his mother.
Say, what you cooking tonight?
His mother didn't know that her son was free.
Can you put something on? Because I'm on my way. This is your son. And just so you know, I did not escape.
And his first stop is home. To his sons who had grown up without him, and at long last, to an embrace with his mother.
When was the last time you were able to put your arm around your mother?
18 years ago.
You haven't touched your son
No.
in 18 years.
18 years
ago.
I had no idea.
He is rejoining the world, picking up where he left off.
Okay, guys, here he is.
And after all that time behind bars, he finally has places to go and people to see. At his lawyer's office, Graves is able to thank the people who may well have saved his life, the students who got him off death row. But there's someone else in the crowd. For the first time since Graves' trial, he sees Roy Ritter,
Damn you, Nicole.
his best friend,
Good to see you, X.
whose testimony did so much to put him away.
It happens to the best of us, huh? But you know I love you, man.
Oh my God.
What did that mean to you?
For him to take those minute and a half and give me that assurance. You know, that's what life is really all about.
Was it hard to forgive him?
No. No, it wasn't hard at all. He just became another pawn in their game of chess.
In Anthony Graves' trial,
But Kelly Siegler is not nearly as forgiving. At a news conference, she lashed out at Charles Sebesta, who was once a fellow prosecutor.
I think ultimately it's the prosecutor's responsibility. Charles Sebesta handled this case in a way that would be best described as a criminal justice system's nightmare.
What are you saying about him?
I'm saying that Charles Sebesta did everything he could, manipulating witnesses, fabricating evidence, using people, misrepresenting things to the judge and to the jury to make sure Anthony Graves got convicted of capital murder and put on death row.
Graves' attorneys had filed a complaint against Sebesta, but the Texas State Bar dismissed it, and Sebesta insists he did nothing wrong. that Siegler was just afraid of losing a big case.
They didn't have an intention of trying this case. Basically, they're looking for a way out.
Sebesta says you didn't want to take the risk of losing it at trial.
Really?
That's what he said.
Well, I would say that he's going to have a hard time finding any single other person that would agree that I'm afraid to go to trial on anything.
But Siegler says there was one thing she dreaded about this case, telling the victim's family that the man they believed was a murderer for so long is not.
18 years they've believed that the two men responsible for killing their family, their babies, their mom, their sister, got what they deserved.
It could have been different.
Glenda Rutledge lost her 2 daughters that August night in 1992.
Some of them are never going to change their minds. They're always going to think Anthony Graves is guilty, no matter what I say. How do you get upset with them? They're as much a victim of what happened as Anthony Graves is.
For his own troubles, Anthony Graves should have been paid $1.4 million when he was released. That's what the state of Texas figures 18 years of wrongful imprisonment is worth. But there was a paperwork snafu. His release documents never used the words actual innocence, so Texas refused to pay.
2 words. They're holding me hostage behind 2 words.
Finally, after 9 months of public pressure, the legislature passed and the governor was quick to sign a special measure awarding him the money. Graves credited 48 Hours Mystery for drawing attention to what he was owed. But he had already won the biggest fight of his life, for his life and for his freedom.
You could put your hands out and touch both walls where I was living at, you know.
He can come and go as he pleases, as he tries to absorb how far he's come from a previous life he's still struggling to understand.
They were trying to kill me. I still can't wrap my mind around how the hell did I go from home to death row for a crime that happened in another town to people I don't even know. It's crazy. And I gave 18 years of my life.
I had no idea where this case would lead. This case will turn the district attorney's office upside down. I never worked a case where I put so much heart and time into bringing a man home because of an injustice. I'm Jay Salpeter, I'm Marty Tankliff's private investigator.
My name is Marty Tankliff. It was my first day of school, so I expected to wake up in the morning and go to school and start my senior year.
When he woke up, instead of going to school, he found his father on the doorstep of death and his mother murdered. They were bludgeoned and stabbed.
I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought I was in a nightmare. I saw him sitting in his office chair and he was covered in blood. I knew he was alive because he was making breathing noises. I called 911 from the phone right there.
All right, hold on and I'll connect you. I'm connecting you with the ambulance.
Marty was a suspect because Marty was the only survivor in the house. And that's why the detective went right for Marty. Marty Tankleff was 17 years old at the time that he was arrested for murdering his parents in their home in Beltair, Long Island.
How do you find, ask the defendant, Martin Tankleff, as to count 2, murder, 2nd degree?
Guilty.
There's no way I could have hurt my parents. I love them.
I knew immediately he couldn't do it.
The victim's family are Marty's family, and they feel that Marty did not commit this crime.
Marty was railroaded. He loved his mom, he loved his dad.
I'm here because I believe Marty is innocent.
All rise. James Gandolfini became interested in Marty's case. He saw a man that was in jail that shouldn't be in jail. Some of my witnesses. This was more than just a job. This became an obsession to me. When you see a case like this and you know something's wrong, you have to have an obligation in life. At the end of the day, the people responsible for killing Seymour and Arlene Tankleff, they will go to jail. Marty is innocent. Marty's coming home.
Fight for the truth.
No one could imagine that I would end up being in this place, because I'm innocent.
Marty Tankleff had just turned 17 when he was arrested for the murder of his parents, Seymour and Arlene.
What's it like here?
Difficult, but I keep myself as busy as possible. I spend hours working on my case every day. It's a struggle.
He has spent his entire adult life in remote upstate New York prisons. It's a far cry from Marty Tankleff's childhood, spent in the lap of luxury in this sprawling Long Island waterfront home.
It was a wonderful childhood. I had more than the average kid.
Seymour and Arlene Tankleff were unable to have children of their own, so they adopted Marty as a baby.
He was just beautiful, and Arlene was just so thrilled how she wanted that baby.
What was your mom like?
Great. She adored me and I adored her. And we were like best of friends.
He was also close to his father.
My father lived a very poor childhood. And when I became a teenager, he had money. So he was living his childhood through me vicariously.
Would you describe yourself as spoiled?
Yes. You know, I got basically everything I ever wanted.
Seymour, a savvy and tough entrepreneur, was grooming Marty to follow in his footsteps.
I wanted to be a businessman, so I enjoyed being involved in all of that.
Marty says he knew everything about his father's businesses, including the trouble his dad was having with a partner in a bagel shop, Jerry Stuerman, who owed him around $500,000.
The friendship had dissipated. They essentially became enemy business partners.
Despite the tension between Seymour Tankleff and Jerry Stuerman, both men continued to play in a weekly poker game. And on September 6, 1988, it was Marty's father's turn to be host. The game lasted into the wee hours, with Stuerman last to leave. The next morning, Marty says he woke to find his father near death. He called 911.
Just remember the woman screaming and yelling.
Listen to me!
Saying, calm down, calm down.
I'm sending you an ambulance.
She gave me some instructions.
I want you to take a clean towel, wrap wherever he's gushing blood from.
And did you do that?
I did that.
Then, he says, he searched for his mother. He found her, dead on her bedroom floor.
How would you describe the scene when you got there?
It was brutal. It was very brutal.
James McCready, the lead detective, now retired, arrived an hour later. Seymour Tankleff, bludgeoned and stabbed, but still alive, had been rushed to the hospital. Arlene's body still lay in her room.
It was an eerie feeling because it always is an eerie feeling. She was nearly decapitated, and it appeared to me that she had struggled with whoever assaulted her.
McCready, a homicide cop for 10 years, saw no sign of forced entry, and he was immediately bothered by Marty's appearance.
He was sitting as calm can be, with his hands clasped just like this.
What would you have expected him to be doing?
I think he would have been crying. I think he would have been shaken, been very upset.
What impression did you get from the way he was talking to you?
That he was trying to help me and he wanted my help.
As the conversation developed, I could see that he was lying. I mean,
And how did you know that?
It's not so much the way what is said, it's the way in which it's said.
Marty volunteered his suspicions that Jerry Stuerman, his father's partner, was somehow involved.
I knew that he was there. I knew he had problems with my father.
And Marty agreed to talk more about that at police headquarters. But in fact, McCready thought he already had his man. Why would Marty kill his parents? Why?
One of the simplest old things in the world, greed.
17-year-old Marty sat with McCready and his partner, without a lawyer, in a small windowless room. For hours, the detectives questioned him.
It was the constant barrage. Marty, we know you did it. Everything will be okay. Just tell us you did it. We know you did it. And it was the on and on and on questioning, over and over.
Then McCready did something that would change everything. He left the room, pretended to talk on the phone, and came back with news about Seymour Tankleff.
Your father, they pumped him full of adrenaline, and he came out of his coma, and he said that you did it, Marty.
You lied to him?
Yes, I lied to him.
Yeah, and that's all right to do?
The United States Supreme Court says it is.
And what are you thinking?
That this can't be happening, that this is not real.
Marty begged to take a polygraph. The detectives refused. So you're better at telling whether someone's lying?
I think I'm better than a polygraph machine.
McCready's scheme worked. Marty began to wonder if he blacked out and, in fact, had attacked his parents. Finally, he told the police what they wanted to hear.
It's like having an 18-wheeler driving on your chest, and you believing that the only way you can get that weight to get off your chest is to tell the police whatever they want to hear.
Even admitting to a murder?
Yeah. Even admitting to a murder.
McCready began to prepare a written statement. Are these his words? Did he write this?
No, it's my handwriting.
Although Marty never signed it and almost immediately recanted, the detectives had enough. Marty was arrested and charged with murder.
It was wrong. It was wrong from the beginning.
Private Detective J. Salpeter began working on Marty's case 7 years ago.
You can't leave a case like this. You become addicted to a case like this.
Salpeter's addiction would eventually lead to startling new clues that would turn the case around. Is there a side of you afraid that you just may never get out of here?
No.
Marty, look!
Marty! Look! The truth is out there.
Marty!
Do you think about your parents?
Every day. I think about all the good times that we had together.
From the moment Marty Tankleff was arrested, his cousin and guardian, Ron Falvey, never believed Marty murdered his parents.
He is guilty of waking up in the morning alive.
And Ron's not the only family member in Marty's corner.
I'm Marty's uncle.
Carolyn Falvey, Marty's cousin.
Ever since the 1988 murders, all of these relatives have been fighting to free Marty.
The strange part is there isn't anybody sitting here that ever got a question asked by the police. They never talked to anybody in this room.
They say you never even tried to talk to them.
That's not true.
Are you saying they're lying?
Yes.
Lead detective James McCready. Did you ask to speak with them and they said no?
No, I never directly asked them to speak to them. I didn't have to. What were they going to add to my case?
But they say they had plenty to add. For one thing, they knew Marty. Does anyone here, though, think it was odd that he wasn't very emotional?
No. That's his way. This is the way he is.
The whole family is here today.
And while police say Marty killed his parents to get money, his family disagrees.
He didn't get any money. He wasn't supposed to get any money until he was 25 years old.
And
so what was he
just
supposed to
turned
do from
17.
17 to 25?
Wouldn't you wait?
Were you aware of that?
No, I was not. No, I was not.
Jim, isn't it important to talk to everybody before you settle on someone when you know their entire life could be ruined by this?
No. Under the circumstances in this case, everything we needed to know, we pretty much knew in the first day.
With the suspect behind bars, Detective McCready thought he had the whole case wrapped up in a day. But a week later, with Marty's father Seymour lingering in a coma, the case took an unexpected turn. Seymour's business partner, the same man Marty had told the police to investigate, suddenly disappeared. Did you think he would become then a main suspect?
Yes.
But as this police report shows, Detective McCready still refused to consider Jerry Stewerman a suspect. I'm reading from a missing persons report, and it says, homicide has no reason to believe that Stewerman's absence is connected with the murder. Why not?
Because he had nothing to do with that murder.
Didn't his disappearance make your case harder?
Not that it made it harder. It just added more questions.
2 weeks later, the detectives found Stewerman in Long Beach, California. He was living under an alias. I mean, didn't you say to Jerry, you're messing up my case here?
Something like, I remember saying something to him to that effect, yes.
Stewerman returned home, claiming his personal and financial problems caused him to flee.
I had too many problems, and it's just 20 years of building up, that's all. So I staged my death.
Is it possible Jerry hired someone?
No, he couldn't. That man couldn't hurt a fly.
1 month after the Tankliffs were attacked, Seymour died without ever regaining consciousness. Marty was then charged with 2 murders, and a year and a half later, he went on trial.
I think every emotion ran through me, scared, fearful, but I was also hopeful because I knew that I was innocent. And, you know, I always believe that innocent men don't get found guilty.
By far, the most damaging evidence against Marty was his confession. But there was little physical evidence to back it up. None of Marty's hair nor blood was found on his parents. His mother, Arlene, had clearly fought her attacker, yet Marty had no cuts or bruises, only some swelling in his eyes from a nose job he got for his 17th birthday. The jurors also heard from Jerry Stewerman, who denied having anything to do with the crime.
I would never do anything like that.
He did admit he owed Seymour Tankliff hundreds of thousands of dollars, and part of all of his future ventures as well.
You didn't have a right to set up that business and leave him out, correct?
In his mind.
Under intense questioning,
Marty Tankliff sitting over there.
Stewerman snapped.
The only mistake
Your
is
Honor, can we have a
I lived
direction
on.
to allow this
I was a
witness to
poor
please
man
answer
living like a millionaire.
By contrast, Marty Tankliff was composed on the stand.
Marty, did you kill your father?
Absolutely not.
Perhaps too composed, as he tried to explain why he would confess to something he didn't do.
They were saying, my father said I did this. My father never lied to me.
After a week's deliberation, the jury reached its verdict.
Guilty.
The day he was convicted was as hard, was the worst, as the day I learned my sister was killed.
Marty was sentenced to 50 years to life. 11 years later, Jay Salpeter, a retired New York City police detective, stepped in.
How could you not be involved in a case like this? And this kid didn't do it.
Salpeter believes Marty's alleged confession was coerced, and he is not alone.
Oh, it's a confession. It's a false confession.
Richard Offshee, an expert in interrogation tactics, is working on Marty's appeals.
You know that everyone listening to this is saying, you couldn't make me confess to a crime I didn't commit, certainly not a brutal murder like this.
Want to bet? Happens all the time.
In Marty's case, he says, the teenager was tricked into doubting his own memory.
He knows he didn't do it, but he's confronted with a police officer who's lying to him and skillfully lying. All of a sudden, there's a way of reconciling it. And that is, you had a blackout because of some psychological condition that you've got that impairs your memory.
False confessions do happen. 25% of the people who've been exonerated with DNA evidence had confessed to crimes they did not do. Offshee is convinced Marty's confession is false because it doesn't match the crime scene evidence. For example, Marty allegedly told police that he used a barbell and kitchen knife as murder weapons, but not a trace of blood was found on them, even when they were microscopically examined.
If he cleaned off the weapons, why wasn't any blood found in the plumbing?
Every confession does not have 100% of the truth in it because they don't give you the whole truth.
The forensics team found bloody glove prints at the scene, but Marty never mentioned wearing gloves, and those gloves were never found.
What happened to the gloves?
I don't know.
And that doesn't concern you?
No.
You know, you give me a kid like that, I'll have him tap dancing that he killed his parents. We could do it. Is it right? No.
Salpeter conducted his own investigation and with old-fashioned legwork tracked down this man, a man who would unravel the entire case.
Did you ever tell anybody?
No.
Former Detective James McCready refused to reconsider his initial conclusions, even when the crime scene evidence raised doubts.
Once you have that confession, aren't you caught? Because you can't bring anyone else to trial once you have that confession.
Well, I'm not taking a confession from an innocent man. I would never do that.
But at the time of Marty's arrest, McCready and his fellow detectives in Suffolk County, New York, had an astonishingly high confession rate, 94%. So high, a state commission said it provoked skepticism. McCready defends his work.
A homicide squad is sort of the creme de la creme, if you will.
But in Marty's case, says private investigator J. Salpeter, McCready was simply wrong.
The forensic work does not fit the story.
If Marty didn't kill his parents, then who do you believe did?
I know.
Salpeter says it was this man, Glenn Harris, who gave him the break in the case. A career criminal serving time for burglary, Harris said after 14 years of silence, he was ready to admit his involvement in the Tankleff murders.
I thought if I could do something right for somebody else, I'd be helping myself.
Harris says that on a night in September 1988, he was the driver on the way to what he thought would be a home burglary.
Who were you with that evening?
Joseph Creedon and Peter Kent.
Joseph Creedon, known on the street as Joey Guns, and Peter Kent also have long criminal records. In a notarized affidavit, Harris says he drove them to an upscale neighborhood and parked his car where Creedon told me to stop.
When they returned to the car, were you aware of what happened?
I knew something happened. Their demeanor, their behavior, it wasn't normal.
And what were your feelings? Do you remember
That
how you were
something
feeling?
more than a burglary happened. Usually when you commit a burglary, there's proceeds of something, and that wasn't there.
And can you tell me what their demeanor was?
Extremely nervous, winded, Creedon's anxiousness to get out of there.
Harris says he later watched Peter Kent burning his clothes, and when he heard about the Tankleff murders, he put 2 and 2 together, but kept quiet.
I had no right being up there. I was just out on parole.
Glenn Harris took and passed a polygraph arranged by Marty's investigator, Jay Salpeter.
He's telling the truth. In my opinion, Glenn Harris is the hero here.
What's more, Salpeter says, Joey Guns Creedon is linked to the man who police dismissed as a possible suspect.
Jerry Stewman has ties to Joseph Creedon. This is not a random hit.
Jerry Stewman, the bagel shop owner who was heavily in debt to Seymour Tankleff, is connected to Creedon through his son, Todd Stewman, like Creedon, a convicted criminal. Salpeter believes Jerry Stewman hired Creedon the night the Tankleffs were killed.
My scenario is that Seymour is sitting at the desk. Jerry Stewman is talking to him, keeping Seymour's attention on Jerry. At this point, behind Seymour, coming through the door, Joe Creedon, Peter Kent, and they took Seymour out. And then they went for Mrs. Tankleff.
Jerry Stewman now lives in an upscale community in Boca Raton, Florida. He refuses to talk to 48 Hours, but both he and his son Todd deny they had anything to do with the Tankleff murders. Still, the new evidence provided by Glenn Harris is a major break for Marty Tankleff. He's been granted a hearing. If the judge at this hearing determines that the new evidence would have caused the old jury to vote a different way, then Marty will get a new trial and a real shot at winning his freedom. As the hearing begins, Marty's lawyers, who are working pro bono, and his large extended family are thrilled to be back in court.
We are very hopeful. We believe in his innocence, and we know that he'll be, hopefully, out soon.
But that evidence will not go unchallenged.
This is not a game of stickball where you do a do-over.
Assistant District Attorney Leonard Lado is fighting to uphold Marty's verdict.
There's a verdict, there are appeals, there have been federal habeas petitions. He's lost.
Lado says Glenn Harris is a liar.
He came forward initially, but when I tried to interview him, he said, I don't want to talk.
In fact, when Harris takes the stand, he refuses to testify, afraid he'll be charged with the murders.
And in my view, he isn't testifying because he doesn't want to get up on the stand and be exposed as a liar.
But when he was in prison, Harris confessed to a Catholic priest. With Harris's permission, the priest tells the court the same story Harris told 48 Hours.
He really wanted to do the right thing, but he was a man who was terrified.
And there are more than a dozen other new witnesses who back Harris's story. Carlene Kovacs met Creedon at a party, and she says he bragged about the murders.
You really believe when he said he was involved in the Tankleff murders that he was telling the truth?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You're being accused of murder. Do you have anything to say?
Prosecutor Lado claims Creedon took credit for the crime only to enhance his violent reputation. But other witnesses brought to court by Tankleff's attorneys say Joey Guns Creedon tried to involve them in the murder plot. There's Joe Graydon, who says he and Creedon made a failed attempt to ambush a man he now believes was Seymour Tankleff.
We had to go up to the bagel store to make it look like a robbery. He wasn't there. We missed him. We're supposed to catch him coming out of the back.
And there is this witness, Bill Ram, another associate of Creedon. He confirms Glenn Harris's story that the killers started out at his house the night of the murders.
What were you doing that evening?
I was hanging out at my house, had a few people over.
Ram, a convicted drug dealer, recalls what Creedon told him that night.
He said, I'm working for somebody who's got a partner in the bagel business that needs to be straightened out. He said, there's some money in it for me if we go there, and just, he's going to threaten the guy or rough him up.
Ram says that he turned Creedon down, but Glenn Harris did not.
When I saw him the next day, he was completely distraught.
What do you mean by distraught?
Just shooken up, couldn't hold the thought, just scared to death. I told him, just listen, keep your mouth shut.
What surprised you the most that you've heard from these witnesses?
Their honesty, that, you know, after all these years that they would come forward and admit their involvement in such brutal crimes.
When it's the state's turn to present witnesses, the hearing becomes almost surreal. Incredibly, the star witness is Peter Kent, Joe Creedon's alleged accomplice.
When they bring me in, you know, they told me that we don't believe that you did this. You know, I thought maybe like they were trying to play technology games with me, you know. Yeah, Peter, we don't think that you really did it, but just come on, come forward, you know.
Kent denies he had anything to do with the murders.
I know I was not there with Glenn, doing no murders.
But even he says Joe Creedon is capable of murder.
With a name like Joey Guns?
Just not these murders.
Joey was not the killer for these murders. I know that because he was not with me that night, and we didn't do this with Glenn. It never happened.
Were you in that house that night?
Creedon, who's been convicted of rape and grand larceny, denies ever killing anyone. But on the stand, he admits to a life of violence, collecting money for drug dealers.
It's hard to know that a person as evil as himself can walk out of the courtroom free, and they're putting handcuffs on my nephew to take him back to the holding cell.
Do you believe these two career criminals who have admitted a history of violence,
Right.
do you believe when they say they had nothing to do with the Tankleff murders?
I believe, in terms of the evidence, that there's no evidence connecting them to the crime at all, no credible evidence.
But the hearing is not over. After watching a 48 hours report on the Tankleff case, a surprise witness comes forward. Joe Creedon's own son. The final witness for Marty Tankleff, and maybe the most surprising one, is 17-year-old Joe Garasio, who comes to court to accuse his own father, Joey Guns Creedon, of murder.
You didn't see your dad a lot when you were growing up.
No, ma'am.
In 2004, the young man finally got to spend time with a father he barely knew. He says at first he was thrilled, but later, after seeing a 48 hours report on the Tankleff murders, he had to ask his father the tough question.
Dad, tell me, did you really do this? He tells me, yes, I did do it.
For several months, young Joe says he kept to himself what his father said. When he finally told his mother, she convinced him to testify and called Private Detective Jay Salpeter. But Assistant DA Leonard Lato believes Joe Garasio is just lashing out at his father.
The first question is, did the judge believe it? If he doesn't believe it, it's nothing.
In fact, Lato doesn't believe that any of Tankleff's new witnesses can be trusted, especially since so many of them have criminal histories.
The point is, those things affect their credibility. Like the people who implicated Creedon, they all admitted one thing. They all hated him. That's a reason to say things about a person that isn't true.
The district attorney of Suffolk County has an obligation to seek the truth. The district attorney is doing everything here to suppress the truth from coming out.
You really believe that?
All my heart.
In March 2006, 18 months after the hearing began, finally a decision. But it's a heartbreaking one for Marty Tankleff. The judge dismisses the new witnesses as nefarious scoundrels and refuses to grant him a new trial.
Which means Marty's conviction stands. But he does have one last hope, an appellate court.
I will now proceed to call the calendar. People versus Tankleff.
In October 2007, 4 appellate court judges hear the case in a courtroom packed with Tankleff supporters.
The DA concedes everything you're saying.
Front and center is one of Marty's biggest and best-known backers.
James Gandolfini.
How did that happen?
Well, I met James about 2 years ago. All rise. And I started talking to him about Marty.
Actor James Gandolfini went to visit Marty in an upstate prison.
He knew I was innocent, he believed in me, and he would do anything he can to help out.
Have seats, come to order.
Marty's lawyers argue that even though some witnesses have criminal records, they could still be telling the truth.
Prosecutors have to use these witnesses all the time. It's got to be the same for the defense.
There were people that you brought forward who have criminal histories, a lot of them. What gave them credibility as a group?
They didn't know each other. They came from different walks of life, different communities. So how do you get 20 people to lie, to come in and just make up a story that's consistent with each one and all name the same people?
This court stands in recess.
In December, the court rules. 19 years after Seymour and Arlene Tankleff were killed, 17 years after Marty Tankleff went to prison, he finally gets the news he has dreamed of all those years. The court overturns Marty's conviction unanimously.
And what did they tell you at that moment?
Can I say it? Bruce said, pack your shit, you're coming home. That was his exact line.
On the other side.
Within days, Marty is brought to Suffolk County one more time.
Was there any side of you, Marty, a little scared of getting out? You had spent your entire adult life in prison.
I was ready for everything.
Hey, George. All right, we got our picture. Hi, Dad. Marty, look. Marty! Look, Marty. There you go.
The following morning, his family gathers at the courthouse.
How are you? Congratulations.
Marty could be retried for murder, but the court agrees to release him on $1 million bond.
As executed by Carol and Mr. Falvey.
Did you have any hesitation to do that?
No, not at all. None whatsoever. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Minutes later, Marty walks free.
He's out.
There's a live picture from Chopper 12.
The event is carried live on Long Island television.
Marty, how's it feel to be out?
We'll make a statement upstairs.
Little room, please. Little room.
I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I was outside, free man, walking with my attorneys and being bombarded by everybody.
Gentlemen, we need a path here. Clear path, son.
Marty Tankleff is coming back in now to go before the microphones and talk to the media, along with his family and friends.
Good morning.
Just mind-boggling. And I walked in there. I don't remember what I said, really. I remember just seeing all the family crying, and I just remember hugging everybody. I wouldn't have wanted it any better way, having all my family together.
Welcome home, Marty.
It's great to see all of you here today. My arrest and conviction was a nightmare. This is a dream come true.
Still a little hard to believe?
Yeah, I mean, it just came so suddenly. We lost the battle, but today we won the war.
This is a man who gave me my life back. It was his dedication that saved me.
We were scared to death 19 years ago, but he's done a terrific job.
Did you ever really think this day would come?
There's a side of me that finds it hard to believe. However, there was never a doubt in my mind that this day would come.
And if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Here comes Marty. Here he comes.
But at that moment, you're still facing trial.
At that moment, yes, but I wasn't even thinking about it because it was the first time I was essentially a free person wearing street clothing.
Marty, right here, right here.
Marty is followed to his cousin's home,
How you feeling, buddy? How you doing?
where there is a long-anticipated celebration.
I haven't had a real plate of food, so. I walked into my family's house that was filled with friends and family, and it was a loving, caring, warm environment. It felt like I hadn't left.
How's the food? Yeah.
I'm looking for another round.
But Marty Tankloff's case has caught the attention of top state officials, and his fate is now in the hands of the governor.
Buddy, you making history today. How do you feel, buddy? Congratulations, buddy.
Thank you very much, thank you.
What are your thoughts tonight?
I just want to spend some quality time with my family.
After 17 years of isolation, Marty Tankloff suddenly is thrust into the spotlight.
Marty! Marty, right here, right here! Marty, thank you, pal.
He's moved in with his cousin, Ron Falby.
At times it gets a little hairy, and you wake up in the morning and they're sitting there waiting for you. You go to bed at night and they're still out there sitting there waiting for you. And yeah, it's like we got a little feeling of what a rock star is,
It's not just the notoriety that's new for Marty.
Shock was the technology. Sending an email across the world and getting a response back in 3 seconds. Never knew that was possible.
The world changed while Marty was locked up.
What else? Anything else that surprised you?
How good it was to wake up in the morning, be able to make my own cup of coffee, walk out the back door, watch the sunrise.
When was the lowest period in all of this?
Every day in prison is a low period. You wake up and the smells, the sounds, the noise, that's the low period. And you have to force yourself to get past that period to kind of get through the day. That's the first sunrise that I was able to take a picture of.
At age 36, Marty finally feels like a free man.
I was given my life back. I mean, literally in a 10-day period, I went from a prison cell, serving 50 years to life, to being back with my family. It's all right. Kind of exciting. And Mickey, you want coffee?
His apparent seamless transition to the outside world surprises his family.
My wife and I have been watching him closely, and his manners are still there. He still helps his aunts.
What else do you need? A little sugar? You want a little milk?
Yeah. What was your concern?
That he would harden in there and that he would lose his spirit, and it didn't happen.
I didn't live in the prison system. I resided there.
What do you mean?
Well, my body was physically there, my mind wasn't, my soul wasn't.
But his legal ordeal is not over. New York's governor appoints a special prosecutor from the Attorney General's office to investigate and determine once and for all whether Marty should be retried for the murder of his parents.
We can collect materials and try to reach a determination of how long it will take us to be able to decide whether to proceed with the case.
It's yet one more frustrating delay. But Marty wastes no time and enrolls in college. At the same time, he helps his lawyers prepare for a possible new trial.
And this is all the case files. I mean, essentially everyone is a different witness. False confessions, coercive interrogations.
6 months after Marty Tankloff's release, the decision. Marty returns to court.
Today is a day, it's not just about me. It's about my mother's sisters, my father's family.
He is prepared for battle.
17 years in prison, I fought for the day for a new trial.
All rise. The Supreme Court of Suffolk County Criminal Term Part 5 is now in session.
Though there is some evidence that Mr. Tankloff committed the crimes charged, the evidence is insufficient to conclude or to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did so. The people hereby move to dismiss indictments number 1535.
It's over. The Attorney General's office asks the court to drop all charges.
You know, the 18-wheeler has finally driven off my chest. I can kind of just get on with life now.
While the decision doesn't completely exonerate him, it's the next best thing. Marty is free and clear. His record now clean.
They say there is some evidence against Marty. We've known that for 20 years. They browbeat a confession out of him. Of course, there's some evidence against him.
Do you feel anybody still looks at you and wonders?
I haven't sensed that at all. I think anybody who knows the facts has no doubt that they know I'm innocent.
What's more, the special prosecutor's investigation uncovers a stunning piece of evidence that points away from Marty's guilt and was overlooked for 2 decades. There's a bloody imprint of a knife on Arlene Tankliff's bedsheet, and it matches no knife in the Tankliff home.
It's showing that someone left the house with the murder weapon, and it wasn't Marty.
Marty remains convinced that it was his father's former business partner and hired thugs who killed his parents.
My family and I won't stop till, they are prosecuted and they're in prison.
But the state says neither that bloody knife imprint nor any other forensic evidence links them to the murders. And the state also finds many of the witnesses unreliable. So for now, no one is charged with a crime.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating that the system doesn't work.
But Marty is finally free to make something of his future. He has set his sights high.
I'm majoring in sociology, and then I'll go on to law school.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Why?
I've been exposed to a system that just has so many problems, and I want to change it. I want to make changes.